Okay, here we are on the backside of day 3 notes, and we are asked to factor, and that is a trinomial. However, because of this 15 right here, this makes this a more of a hard trinomial. So we can give him a sad face if you'd like, because you got more work to do. Because it's a trinomial, we're going to go ahead and set up our X box. Normally it would be 2 at the top for our multiply, but because of that 15 is there, it's actually 15 times 2, which is 30, and that becomes our multiply number. At the bottom is going to be that positive 13 in the middle, also known as your B value, and that is going to be our add. We will now come up with our numbers that do the job, and in the first ones I think of are 10 and 3, so let's double check to see if they work. 10 times 3 is 30, and 10 plus 3 is 13, and so they do work. However, it is a hard trinomial. You cannot just throw 10 and 3 into your factors and box them up and be done. My sad face here tells me that I have more work to do. So 15x squared is going to be the first term to be rewritten, and then one of my new numbers, I'm going to choose to put the plus 10 next. However, because this middle term has an x term on it, or a x variable on it, so does our 10 needs the same exact variable. The next is going to be a positive 3, and again, it also needs the x, and then followed up with the plus 2. So this is that same exact term there, same exact term there. The two middle ones come from the numbers we found, but have to have the same variables as the middle term here. We rewrote it as 4 terms in order to group the first two and group the last two. Out of the first group, we will be able to pull out a greatest common factor of 5x, leaving us with a 3x plus 2. Out of the second group, it has to be something positive because of that sign right there. However, there's nothing in common, and so we know we have to write a 1. Left over would be a 3x plus 2. They do match, which is perfect, and so 3x plus 2 becomes our first factor. The guys on the outside, 5x plus 1, become our second factor. None of these factors can be factored again, therefore we box them up, and this one is finished. We're going to head to number 6, and this one freaks out a few people, all because of that negative there, but it's not a big deal. It's still a trinomial. He's still a hard trinomial, so again, we can give him a sad face because we have more work to do. We'll do our X box. We're going to take that negative 10, we're going to multiply it by the 30, and we get negative 300, which is also pretty scary, but that's our multiply. Our add number is the negative 13 sitting in the middle, also known as our B value. And in your calculator, what you can do when your multiply number is extremely high, go to y equals. Once you're in y equals, type in negative 300 divided by x. And x is right next to your alpha button. It's got a bunch of other stuff on it, but when you press it, it'll come up with as an x. Now hit second and your graph key, and it's going to bring you to your table. And in your table, there's going to be all the numbers in 2 columns that multiply to 300, technically negative 300, because that's what we entered in. What you're going to do is you're going to scroll through there, and you're going to try to find a pair of numbers that add to 13, technically negative 13. And I find a pair of numbers that is close enough together, and those numbers are 25 and 12. Does everybody see how you can get a 13 out of that? However, we need a negative 13, so we're going to make the bigger number negative. Now, if you take those 2 red numbers and you multiply them, you get the negative 300, and if you add them in your calculator, you get the negative 13. They work in both, and so we're ready to go ahead and factor this trinomial. But again, remember that he's a hard trinomial. We have more work to do, hence the sad face. So the first term we rewrite is negative 10x squared. Now we pick. Which number would you like, the 25 or the 12? I would go with the 25, but it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to put the minus 25, and I have to look up and realize that that middle term has an x, so my middle term has to have an x as well. Then my plus 12, and again, it needs an x next to it, and then the plus 30. Now that it has been rewritten as 4 terms, I can group the first 2 terms and group the last 2 terms. Out of the first set of terms, or the first group, because this first one is negative, I'm going to go ahead and pull out a negative, and the largest number I can pull out is a 5 and an x. Left over will be a 2x And I'm going to need a plus sign here because remember, I pulled out the negative. So if I distribute, that should give me a negative term. And then I need the 5 here to give me the negative 25x. Close them up. Out of the second one, it definitely has to be something positive. And the largest number that goes into 12 and 30 is 6. And left over would be a 2 to get the 12, a 2x technically, and then a plus 5. Close them up. Great news, they match. And so 2x plus 5 becomes one of my factors. Guys on the outside, squish them together, negative 5x plus 6, and that becomes my second factor. Neither factor can go and be factored again, and so this has been factored, and it is done. Okay, we're going to move down. We can skip number 7. It's just another example. However, I do want to look at number 8. Remember that the first type of factoring you're supposed to check for is greatest common factor. Sometimes pulling out the greatest common factor will turn your hard trinomial into an easy trinomial. Totally what you would want to do. Not that if you didn't do it, it's not possible to still get the right answer. It's just easier. So in the beginning, if you look for a greatest common factor, you're going to realize that 4 can be pulled out, leaving you with an x squared plus 3x minus 10. And now if you look in this parentheses, that's an easy trinomial. And now you can go ahead and set up your x box with a negative 10 for your multiply at the top and the 3 at the bottom for your add. And when we come up with the numbers, you're going to find that they are 5 and 2. But to get this 3 for your add, you're going to have to make your 2 negative, which is perfect because then it makes the multiply to negative 10. And those two numbers add to 3. Again, we're going to give this one a happy face because easy trinomial. So all we have to do is our 2 sets of parentheses, break the x squared up into x and x, one with a plus 5, one with a minus 2, and don't forget to drop down that 4. If that 4 is not there, those 3 factors would not multiply to give you back to the original. They would only multiply back to that easy trinomial. And that one's finished. We're going to go ahead and do number 10. You could do number 9 as well. It's just another example, but let's take a look at number 10. In number 10, again, it's a trinomial, but what do you notice? Not only is it a hard trinomial, it is also one with a twist. So first thing, again, we look for is something that we can pull out. And out of those 3 terms, 3 is a greatest common factor, and so we are going to pull it out. When we're finished, we are going to have a 4x to the 4th plus 19x squared minus 5. Okay. So what would have been cool is if this was an easy trinomial with a twist, but it's not. It's a hard trinomial with a twist. No big deal. We're going to go ahead and set up our x box off to the side. We're going to say that because it's a hard trinomial, we can give them a sad face. We have more work to do. That 4 times that negative 5 should give us a negative 20 for our multiply at the top. And the 19 in the middle is our add at the bottom. We come and think up the numbers. And I'm going to say that it's got to be 20 and 1. But to get a 19, the 1 has to be negative, which is perfect because it multiplies to negative 20. And at the same time, it adds to a positive 19. Okay. Again, remember that he's a hard trinomial. And so we're going to have to go ahead and rewrite this. What should we do with the 3? What I do with the 3 is I bring him all the way down here into my answer. So I don't have to worry about it all the way as I'm doing my work. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and write 4x to the 4th, which is the first term. I'm going to pick the 20 to write next, so plus 20. However, remember that it has to have the same variables as the middle term up here, which is an x squared. Then the minus 1, and it also has to have the same variable, x squared, attached to it, and then the minus 5. I rewrote it for 4 terms in order to group the first 2 and group the last 2. Out of the first group, I can pull out a 4x squared, left over with an x squared plus 5. Out of the second group, it has to be a negative, and the only thing that's in common is a 1, and I have to make sure I write it. Left over would be an x squared, and again, you pulled out the negative, so this actually has to be a positive, so that gives you the negative 5 when you distribute. which is perfect because those match. And so that becomes my next, in my next step, my first factor. Technically, that 3 is my first factor, but x squared plus 5 will be the second factor. The guys on the outside will get squished together and become my third factor. And before I box this up, I noticed something. I have good math eyes. And this guy right here is a difference of 2 perfect squares. I have the difference in the middle, and 4 and 1 are both perfect squares, and anything with an even exponent is a perfect square. So I'm going to go ahead and factor the D2PS. And when we do D2PS's, it's 2 sets of parentheses. We take the square root of the first, which is 2x in both sets of parentheses. 1 is followed by a plus sign. 1 is followed by a minus sign. And the square root of 1 is 1. Everything else comes down. Because if it doesn't, then when we put these all back together, we wouldn't start with what we had in the beginning, and we have to. And that one is finally completely factored. Okay, I hope that helps. If not, there's more examples that you could try on your own, and look in my Google Classroom for the answer keys to these notes, and you can go ahead and do the problems if you need extra practice and check to see if you are correct or not. Bye, guys.